Today's 60-minute international webinar will begin with introductory remarks by Florence Laufer, who is the Migration Integration Program Officer at the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations. And this will be followed by a presentation by Raja Mia of the Peacemaker Organization in Oldham in the UK, and a presentation by Marian Vargaftig, who is with Manifest in London. The session will end with a moderated QA led by a question from Helen Walsh here in Toronto with Diaspora Dialogues, and will give our experts on youth engagement an opportunity to answer your questions. I'm inviting Florence Laufer of the UN Alliance of Civilizations to join us to introduce this session today on youth participation and migrant voice. Welcome, Florence.
Hello, Kim. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to introduce today's webinar on youth participation and migrant voices. I work for the Alliance of Civilizations, a UN initiative launched in 2005 with the aim to improve understanding and cooperation among people of different cultures and to counter extremism. We work in 4 main areas of action: media, youth, education, and migration. The Alliance acts within a global network of partnerships, including national and local governments, international organizations, civil society, and the corporate sector. This way, we avoid duplicating the work others are doing, and we expand efforts already underway by doing advocacy, bridge building, facilitation, and dissemination. Along with global flows of goods and information, increase in migration of people leads to new levels of cultural diversity. We know that good integration of migrant populations is necessary in order to improve social cohesion and intercultural relations. This is why we promote good integration practices and we highlight successful experiences in order to build trust and to counter stereotypes. Young migrants are particularly vulnerable, and yet they're very flexible and dynamic, so they often prove to be leaders of their family's integration in the new culture. To support their role in advancing intercultural cooperation, both locally and internationally, we launched a Youth Solidarity Fund and an online youth community website. Even though its negative role is often stressed, the media can be a central tool to promote inclusive societies. We encourage initiatives empowering youth to consume media critically, evaluating information sources, and separating fact from opinion. The active involvement of youth in media productions can also mainstream their call for inclusion and for participation. In partnership with the International Organization for Migration, with the support of 18 other partners, the Alliance launched Plural Plus, an international youth video festival. Plural Plus involves youth aged 9 to 25 in addressing the key issues in their community related to issues such as migrant integration, identity, diversity, human rights, inclusion, and social cohesion. More than 150 videos have very recently been submitted from 35 countries, and the majority of them were created by migrant youth. Some 10 videos will be awarded during the Plural Plus ceremony held in New York on December 18th. This selection of videos will compose the Plural Plus program in 2010, including screening and conferences at international festivals and television broadcasts. Children and young people from every corner of the world used video cameras to share their vision of a world free of prejudice, of stereotypes, of discrimination, and of intolerance. They expressed their frustration with current immigration policies, and they denounced discrimination, xenophobia, and violations of human rights. The youth illustrated their active contribution to integration processes and to measures for mutual understanding and coexistence. The majority of the videos submitted really a firm call for acknowledgement of youth's role as powerful agents of social change. In the videos, youth clearly communicate their will to be involved in policy decisions and to have their say on various social issues. I'm very eager to learn about the experiences of youth voices on migration made by the projects of Peacemaker and of Manifesta. Thank you.
Thank you, Florence. Thank you very much. It's very, very welcome introduction and to your own project, Plural Plus, which we will all have our eyes on December 18th when the winning entries are announced in New York on International Migrants Day. We'll be posting that information on Cities of Migration, and I'm sure you'll be able to find it as well on the AOC site, and I encourage you all to look at that. So now I'd like to move on and to welcome again Raja Mia, who is with us today from Peacemaker, an organization in the United Kingdom that creates opportunities for youth to meet and befriend other young people from different communities and ethnicities, and to become, as Florence said, leaders in social change. So, hello, Raja. Welcome to Cities of Migration.
Thank you. Okay, well, this is my first webinar, so a new experience for me, so thank you very much for inviting me. How can I start? Let me see. I mean, again, if I speak too fast or if my northern accent is difficult to understand, please let me know and I will try to speak slower and make sure I can get my points across as best as I can. To give you a context into who we are and what we've historically done, Peacemaker is a genuine NGO. It was created by young people in a northern mill town in the northwest of England, the town being Oldham. And it was created during a time when there was, between ethnic groups, between both migrant groups themselves and also the more established indigenous communities of the town, there was deep conflict in competing for resources. Of course, the nature of all of our migrants is that in the northern towns of England, the migrants tended to establish and settle in the poorest of communities. So often what we find is that community after community, wave after wave, comes in and settles in some of the poorest communities in the country where there is already scant resources and competition for resources. And what we had observed as young people growing up in these communities is that actually if you took away the ethnicity, if at all possible, you would find that there was genuine shared issues across communities of poverty. So historically what took place is the governments, both local government and national government, had tended to engage in these communities where the overriding factor wasn't need but rather ethnicity, and this perception that one ethnic group had specific distinct needs compared to another ethnic group, and resources would be carved up appropriately. More often than not, you would secure resources by demonstrating how your specific ethnic group was more impoverished than the other ethnic group. So it didn't matter if in towns such as ours, whether you were Pakistani, Bangladeshi, from an African Caribbean background, from a new sort of emerging community background, or from your indigenous white community background, the way in which to secure resources for your community was to demonstrate your poverty. And for those of us who created this organization, we had a problem with that. We had a problem with that on two levels. One is there's something dehumanizing around emphasizing how you are disadvantaged, right? And, you know, for us it's a disempowering process that actually was counter to any form of community development that we were interested in. You know, it disempowered people, it created this dependency culture on the state, and it alienated others, because if you were successful in securing funding, it meant 3 other groups and 3 other communities had failed in securing funding. And of course, from our perspective, these issues were shared across communities of poverty, and what we sought to do was demonstrate that resources are more effectively used if we bring people together to respond to issues that they share and challenges that they have in common, as opposed to encouraging communities to compete with each other. We have this watershed moment in our country, which is referred to as the Northern Milltown riots in 2001. And what took place in 2001 was, in towns such as Oldham, Bradford and Burnley, there were these disturbances by what were predominantly South Asian communities. And these disturbances were a backlash to some of the challenges that existed between communities who had won government grants and those communities who had lost government grants. And 2001 was a watershed moment because it demonstrated to government that the historical practices that they had championed were they encouraged communities to compete with each other. The unintended outcome was the growth of animosity and hatred and distrust and mistrust and divisions between communities of poverty, and a recognition in government that these historical practices had to change. And what we saw emerge in 2001 was this thing we refer to as the community agenda, which is very much more of an integration agenda, and I can talk about some of that maybe in some of the questions that we ask later. Now, in terms of what we do, we're very much interested in promoting integration. Now, integration for us is very simple. Migrant communities, minority communities as we tend to call them, one of our failings historically has been that they've developed in isolation, and community organizations that have supported these communities have developed in isolation, and so through exclusively engaging with their own communities, people who speak like them, people who talk like them, people who come from the same ethnic background, there are unintended outcomes that are negative for the wider communities. So what we talk about in terms of promoting integration is that as well as supporting these migrant communities, these immigrant communities, black and ethnic minority communities as we describe them, we not only support the organizations that are historically engaged with these communities, but also support these organizations and their constituents, their young people, to more effectively engage with systems and structures around them. So for instance, historically what has took place in communities where we work with is that there will be a black health agency or a Bangladeshi community centre, and they would exclusively work with their own constituents. And what this did was that it further isolated these groups of young people from the mainstream. So our agenda here is very much to not only support these organisations who engage with these young people, but also support them to make positive links with some of the more mainstream organisations and ensure that these young people from these communities have the opportunities to access the mainstream around them. Through doing that, we build solidarity, because immediately what takes place is these young people recognise that they have some of the same issues that young people from other communities have, and also the established indigenous communities see that these young people share dreams and aspirations and challenges in the same way they do. And if we get this right, what tends to happen is this solidarity means that resources are more effectively distributed based upon need, and these resources cut across communities. So no longer do we see one community being favoured over another. We see an issue that is of relevance to all communities, and young people from across these communities are supported. This collectively responding to challenges is far more effective in engaging and supporting some of the most marginalised communities in our country. Very, very straightforward to do. It's just a completely different mindset from what historically has took place. In terms of some of our interventions with young people, we believe in this peer education model. We believe in this peer education model for a number of reasons. One, because it works with young people. Training young people to support other young people works. But more importantly, what tends to happen in the sort of environments in which we operate is our funding tends to be short-term incentive funding, whether it's a year, whether it's 2 years, and we recognise that actually we cannot transform these communities on our own. What we can do is educate young people to have the life skills, to have an understanding and the experiences, and to have a grasp of some of the challenges where even when our funding finishes and our engagement with these young people finishes, they have the skills to continue to work themselves. Communities are built, challenges are responded to, not necessarily in the training rooms and the formal environments in which we operate. It's over it's over a cup of tea in a very informal place where these young people meet and engage with their peers. And that's what we try to do here. That's what our peer education do. We empower young people to take the skills away where they can, for the rest of their lives, they understand these issues, they understand the challenges, and they can respond to some of that. We have a challenge around refugee integration in our country and the integration of any new migrant community. We seem to replicate the mistakes that have historically took place with previous communities. So the way in which the historical African Caribbean communities settled and integrated in this country, and the challenges and the mistakes that were made there seem to be replicated with our South Asian communities. These very same mistakes appear to be replicated with the next wave of migrants. And what we're trying to do is identify and showcase that this is the historical practice, these are the mistakes that are caused, and here is an alternate way of doing things which meet positive outcomes, but we learn from the past instead of repeating the past. There is a key agenda around preventing violent extremism. What we are seeing is this focus on our Muslim communities, and particularly young people from our Muslim communities who are deemed to be vulnerable to the messages of extremists. If you look, explore how these challenges are being played out in our communities that are represented by black and minority ethnic young people. Historically, these young people would identify by their ethnicity, so they would identify themselves by describing themselves as Somali or Pakistani or Bangladeshi or whatever. With the focus on extremism, these young people are identifying themselves as Muslim, as their predominant identity. And this is causing us challenges in which we are trying to develop and respond to some of these issues and protect our young people. For us, preventing violent extremism is about building the resilience of our young people so they cannot be victimized, they cannot be used as a scapegoat, and also so that they are not exploited by extremists themselves. In terms of some of our work and how we're looking forward and what we're trying to do with this is we have a small portfolio of very successful practice, and a lot of our work is very much spent around continuing to deliver this practice and also supporting other organizations to learn and replicate from our work. What we're finding very much is that what we consider to be very simple approaches in other areas, these things are directly transferable. So we historically worked out of Oldham. We now work in Manchester. We've worked across the country, really. And everywhere we go, people think the challenges they face are unique. But once you go beyond the layers of geography and some of the local context, what you find is actually these challenges and these issues transfer across communities and across the country. And no doubt, from our conversations today, they will these challenges are very similar across the world, and how we respond to that, I think we can learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raja, for that excellent presentation. We're going to move right on to the second presentation. I'd like now to introduce you to Marian Vargavdig, the founder of Manifesta, who joins us today from London. Manifesta projects tend to address issues of cultural diversity, social exclusion and inclusion, and anti-racism, and their medium of choice is film and video production, and their work has a special focus on young people. Marian, please welcome
Yes.
to Migration.
Thank you, Kim, and hello everybody. First, I just want to apologize for my voice, which is due to a very bad sore throat, but I hope you can bear with me regardless. I'm going to talk to you about a specific project which is called Belonging. Belonging is a creative learning initiative aimed at young people. Why did we want to do this project, Belonging? First of all, we wanted to explore young people's own sense of belonging in marginalized urban areas. We wanted to encourage youth expression in relation to their situation of exclusion, and we wanted to encourage them to do that through video creatively. And the reason for doing that is also so that we can then promote, platform, and showcase their preferred ways of talking about belonging by showing the films and initiating debates as widely as possible. So Belonging took place in 3 different locations, in the UK, in Paris, and Lisbon. In the UK, in London, we decided to work with the London Borough of Newham. I just want to say a few words about each location because I think it's important. Newham is one of the poorest and most diverse boroughs of London, with more than 300 languages spoken. It has the lowest white population in London, with 61% of the population drawn from mixed Asian or Asian British, Black African, West Indian, or Black British, Chinese, and other groups. It has the second highest percentage of Muslim in Britain, 24.3%. And in recent years, we saw new immigrants coming in from the Eastern European countries who recently joined the EU. Newham has been branded one of the worst places to live in the UK. A study which was commissioned by a Channel 4 TV program took into account the crime rate, the school results, the pollution, the economic activity and property prices. However, Newham is going to be the place where the 2012 Olympics are going to take place in Stratford, and this is where the Olympic Village is currently being built. However, local people have expressed concern about whether or not it will really benefit the people who live in Newham. In Lisbon, we worked in the suburb of Lisbon, in a place called Casal da Boba, which is a district from Amadora, which is half an hour away from Lisbon. This population is not very diverse. It is composed mainly of people from Cape Verdean origin, 63%, while 31% were from Portuguese origin, and we have 5% of Ogolan and São Tomé people and 1% of Gypsy. The Cape Verdean families used to live in slums, but they were relocated in apartment flats in Boba with gas and electricity. And so they have left their slums a few years ago. And what's interesting is that as they moved to this new place with all the comfortable facilities, their lifestyle changed obviously dramatically, but also their sense of community changed a lot, because suddenly they felt that they lost their community spirit and the sense of community, because they were suddenly living behind closed doors, and they were much more isolated from each other. In Paris, we decided to work in the poorest area of Paris, which is Belleville-Ménilmontant, which is in the 20th arrondissement of Paris. This is a working class area where successive groups of immigrants have settled and where many social housing estates were built in the 70s. Since the 1960s, we've had a lot of Algerian and Tunisian Jews who fled the conflict from North Africa, and this was followed by Algerian, Moroccan, and Tunisian people as funds called from workers from the former colonies. And more recently, we have seen a Chinese community settling in the 80s, and this was followed by African people from Sub-Sahara. So in this area of Paris, there is a great cultural diversity, but there is at the same time a social fragility with low job opportunities and social exclusion. What you see on this picture is a photograph of the Amandier neighborhood, and in particular the housing estate, which is called Les Trois Fuchsias, which is emblematic of these issues. Years of successive urban reconstructions have had the effect of closing this neighborhood on itself. So, working on belonging with young people, young teenagers, we worked on different themes, which were, belonging and identity, how to manage multiple identities, territories and convivialities, migrations and the making of new communities, and of course, intercultural dialogue. So how did we do that? We organized workshops with groups of young people in each location. The first thing we wanted to do for the workshop was to prepare and integrate a social history element of the project. So in each workshop location, we prepared a social local history concise workshop pack, if you want, which was addressing Britain, Portugal, and France in the history of Western European expansion. And by this I mean explorations, invasions, immigrations, colonizations, economic exploitation, and the consequent national and global changes over the centuries. And then we were focusing more on London, Lisbon, and Paris as cities in the global history and the impact on their local histories, the history of other people, in inverted comma, presence and contribution from abroad in their economic and social development. And in the end, we were narrowing down to go to the very local London, Lisbon, and Paris in the 20th and 21st century, immigrations and settlements, by finishing with Newham, Casal Boba, and Paris 20th arrondissement, with the very local history of each city neighborhood today. Then we organized the creative video workshops. And I have to say that the historical element of the project was either delivered before or during the creative video workshop as part of the workshops. So the creative video workshops were led during 5 days by creative video artists and filmmakers, working with young people, working in small groups, discussing ideas, watching examples of film, learning how to make a short film, filming outdoor, in special locations or in studio, interviewing local people, interacting with the population. And at the end of 5 days, I think we can go back to the process of the workshop later on when we have questions, but we are going to watch now a video.
Maybe expecting to belong is an error in our thinking. It's not that we don't belong, but neither do we fully belong. So this raises the question, what does it mean to belong? Is an error in our thinking. It's not that we don't belong, but neither do we fully belong. So this raises the question, what does it mean to belong? But to me, belonging is much more than just belief and places. To me, belonging is to be there for someone, to know that somebody is there for you. It's about growing together. It's about different bodies but one soul. It's about the same difference.
Yes. Okay. I didn't see the end of the film, but never mind. I think it was cut off. But can we go back to the PowerPoint? Yes, thank you. So yes, when the workshops are finished, then the outcome of these workshops was 43 short films of 1 to 3 minutes each, and this is just the beginning of doing things, you know, with these films. So what's very important is to share and to showcase the work, you know, by organizing screenings at local, national, and international level, broadcast and online showcases on the project. We had the Portuguese television, who was a partner and who was going to broadcast all the films produced. Similarly, or rather a bit differently, but online, the BBC London is showcasing the project and showing some films as well. And the films are also sent to festival, national festival, international festival. Some young people have been invited and nominated by some festivals. In Paris, the European Forum on Youth and Moving Image, and also in Amsterdam, the Stranger Festival. So this is also an opportunity for these young people to travel and show their films and meet other young people and discuss the issues that they have tackled in their films. The films are also used in conferences and seminars by the Runnymede Trust and by Festa, and this is another way, yet again, to put on the table, what we've discovered through the films made by the young people. So we've done a number, many different screenings, from end-of-workshop screenings to local community screenings, indoor, outdoor, special screening in the Museum of Modern Art in Portugal, in Paris. Each young person had a certificate of participation as well. And we brought together 20 young people in December last year in Paris as part of the end celebration of the European Year of Intercultural Dialogue. These young people met and discussed and compared between them, with the help of interpreters, how they feel they belong and what they've spoken, what they've expressed in their films. That was also an opportunity for them to visit the museum permanent exhibition and to meet other young people from other countries who worked on a similar project. The films are now used in an educational material which is available online on the Runnymede Trust website, who is a joint partner to this project. And we have also published a policy document aimed at policymakers with some recommendations. So in conclusion, I would like to say that the young people had a lot of learning possibilities during this project: local, global history, filmmaking, communication, and of course a greater understanding of belonging and the making of the communities. The project helped breaking barriers within the local communities and also make them go out of their neighborhoods and even travel abroad and meet other young people. They also improve their self-expression, self-confidence, and they have a sense of achievement, a sense of contribution, and probably a better sense of belonging. This project is also a learning exercise for the adult team. It's rich in experimentation, and it opened intercultural dialogue between the adult team, between the young people, and the films are still disseminated and circulating widely. I just want to say that I learned that out of 35 films in the latest selection from the Plural Plus competition, we have 6 belonging films in the list. So this is really a great achievement already. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marion, and congratulations. That is quite an achievement. Now, thank you for all 3 of our presenters for these fascinating and instructive exchanges on your experiences with intercultural dialogue and borderless video in this case, and the work that you've done with young people to explore issues of identity and belonging and social change across the rich and challenging mosaics of Paris, London, Oldham, Lisbon, and the broader world. We've now concluded the formal presentation part of our webinar, and it's time to open up the questions to you, the public, and we are very fortunate today to have our Q&A session. To help us introduce our Q&A session, we have Cities of Migration guest speaker Helen Walsh. Helen is president of Diaspora Dialogues, which is a Toronto-based literary project that supports the creation and presentation of new fiction, poetry, and drama that reflect the complexity of the city back to Torontonians through the eyes of its richly diverse communities. Diaspora Dialogues is interested in developing creative artists and in building audiences. So Helen's work includes a lot of youth programming and relates very closely to some of the wonderful work we've seen today. Welcome, Helen.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Thank you so much for the presentations. I found it fascinating to learn about what these projects were doing and the language and some of the methods that are used that are similar to ours. Our focus is, like Raja's focus, is on intercultural. And being an arts organization, our focus is also on interdisciplinary. So we bring artists from various disciplines and various communities together in order to create and present art. And one of our three main programming streams, as Kim said, is youth programming. So we work in 4 neighborhoods across the Greater Toronto area, and they're priority neighborhoods, so generally poverty neighborhoods. And we work in the same neighborhoods every year, and we produce about 100 workshops a year, bringing professional artists and writers into the neighborhoods to produce mentoring programs and workshops for youth that are aged 15 to 18. And those they can be filmed, they can be plays, they can be fiction, poetry, hip-hop, and graphic novels. It depends on what the youth in that community want, and so we sit down at the beginning of the program and plan out what the next 3 months will be, and then the workshops are ran, and then we also have a public presentation at the end where the community is invited to see the outcomes of the workshops. I was interested in going through on the websites and then also hearing today some of the themes that come out that were very common among the 3 organizations that are also common to ours. The youth as a powerful agents of social change, exploring the language young people use to talk about belonging, constructing the kind of tolerant communities we want to live in, obviously exploring themes of migration and diversity, and then kind of sense of multiple identities, the fluidity of overlapping senses of belonging that youth often have. And there was a line from Manifesta, which I thought was a great summary kind of line, which was the intercultural dialogue, which is grounded in specificity of personal and social opportunities. So the question I had to lead off was, how does the language that young people use to talk about belonging and identity differ from that of older generations? And what lessons does it have to teach and engage the rest of us? So how would, Marion, would you like to take us, run at that question?
Yes, I can try. I mean, this is a very good question, Helen. It's also a complex question to just answer just like that, I feel. But if we look at the language that adults or people like us use to talk about belonging, we are going to find, to use words like belonging, community, identities, multiculturalism maybe, and diversity, social cohesion, social exclusion, violence, racism, equal opportunities, citizenship. And it's interesting, but when we look at the language that the young people use, for example, in their films, in the belonging films, they talk about the street, they talk about home, they talk about disillusion, they talk about together, being together, neighborhood, struggle, struggling. They talk also about hatred, dignity, friends, difference. And basically, they also talk about life, But I think that the young people tell a lot of things without words. And when they tell us without using the words, they use their personal experience and their stories, and they use short stories or poems, emotions, from their own experience, really. And if you look at the film through their view, their lens, they talk about family, friendship, and this includes also relationship and gender issues. They talk about racism and indifference. They talk about intergenerational issues and youth stereotypes. They also talk about their lack of hope and their lack of opportunities, or very simply being bored, So, I don't see young people disconnected from the society, not all adults, but a lot of adults. And young people, a lot of young people do feel that they are outside, especially those who live in marginalized areas. But the Belonging Project and the films really has given us an opportunity to look at the society through the prism of youth, and to listen how they express it, And what we see is that a number of the young people who took part in the Belonging Project are disconnected with their family, that a community with adults doesn't really appear in the films, and that they seem to have a problem of belonging to family and mainstream society. We can sense skepticism and suspicion for the representation, the representative of the society, and in particular the police, especially in France and Portugal. And belonging is also, it's about cultural and ethnic diversity and places, but the place the young people inhabit very much is the streets.
Well, and that, I believe that was very much where the work that Peacemaker began as well. Perhaps,
yes.
Raja, would you like to comment on the question of how the language young people uses to talk about belonging and identity differs from that of older generations?
I think
why it's to listen to them.
Yeah, no problem. I think several quick points on that. First of all is young people want to have them debates and discussions, and they're far more open to have them debates and discussions without fear of somehow being branded, or we have this notion of political correctness where we work with, and when we work with older people, they're less willing to engage in discussions and debates around belonging and identity, whilst our young people tend to want to have a conversation about these, and I think that's important to point out. What we then find out is young people, they have a more fluid appreciation of belonging and identity. I've seen already these concepts of multiple identities in several other presentations today, and for me and from what we see, young people are more comfortable with this notion of multiple identities more than older people are, and I think that's an asset that we don't make the most of with young people. The way in which we engage from a government level historically has been, you are either one of us or you're someone else. You need to integrate, you need to belong here. And when you translate that into the languages of young people, it's a case of, yes, we can integrate, we can belong, but, we can integrate and we can belong to many different aspects of our identity. And I think, that particular point is often overlooked, and it's probably one of our major strengths when we engage with young people on these issues, is their fluidity and their ability to adapt to circumstance. Multiple identities should be seen as something really positive.
Thank you very much. Now we're getting a number of questions from our audience at this point, so I'd like to open it up to the larger community. Riva asks, how do you approach youth to invite them to participate in the projects, and what's the best way to approach youth? And that's a question we also heard from Nathalie Fillion. So we're combining those two questions, and perhaps you'd like to comment, Marianne, briefly.
The question, what is how to approach young people?
Yes, how to approach young people. How did you recruit the young people, and what recommendations do you have for other organizations who may want to bring the voice of young people into the work that they do in this area?
Yes, the way to make belonging a successful project in 3 different locations was really to work with local organizations who are already grounded locally, because this is the only way to reach the young people. So we worked with local organizations who were already in contact with a number of young people or groups of young people who were then, approached and who were presented the project, and we recruited those who wanted to participate. This is how it happened. In London, myself, because I am based in London, I went to visit a number of youth groups and community organizations to present the project and to discuss with the young people in order to recruit them.
Okay, and Raja?
For us, it's increasingly easier than it ever has been. First of all, we engage and recruit young people by responding to the challenges that they face. Often we see the agendas of adults or the agendas of organizations trying to be promoted in communities with young people. And that's when you see the barriers and the problems, because what you're trying to do is engage and recruit young people in activities that do not necessarily resonate with them. You know, it's a policy issue rather than an issue for young people. So if you go in and engage on their agendas, it's very easy to engage. The other thing I would say is we use this peer education model, and when we are out recruiting and promoting our projects, it isn't necessarily me or any one of the adults who work with me. It's the young people who work alongside us who have helped shape what the activity looks like, what the intervention looks like, and they go out and promote it. And there's great power in young people promoting initiatives that they are leading to other groups of young people. You know, we've never struggled recruiting young people because we use them two approaches.
Okay, we have a couple of questions now specifically about the use that all of your projects have made of video. You know, in the case of Plural and Manifesta, the Belonging Project, a direct use of video, but I noticed that Peacemakers also made powerful use of video in helping communicate its message. So a question from Mr. Dolma, or Tsering Dolma, says all three presenters have engaged youth in video production, and so what they'd like to know is whether this has proved to be the best or a way to get youth involved. And the next question was more specifically, actually we'll start with the question about video. And its power or usefulness to engaging youth in your project. And I guess, Marion, would you like to begin?
Yes. Well, first of all, I mean, I use video because I come from the media, and I've been working a lot with videos and making films, actually, and trying to put marginalized voices in mainstream discussions and mainstream broadcast. But videos, why videos? It's also because this is very appealing for young people, and because the tools for videos there's a democratization of these tools. A lot of young people make already some small films using their mobile phone, for example. So videos is a very appealing tool for the young people. That's why we use video as well, but it's also a very creative tool because we use images and we use words and we use sounds, and we mix all that together. And it's interesting to work by using creative means which are not just words. I mean, some of the belonging films have no word at all, for example, and they are very powerful.
So, Florence, is that perhaps you'd like to comment on what made your organization decide to launch its Plural project, specifically using the medium of film to engage young people?
I think, yes, the media has, the video is a media that has an enormous potential for dissemination and awareness raising, and in that sense it's not only attractive to youth to participate in media productions, but it's also an asset to know that these video productions, will have a great potential to mainstream their voice, and I think it's a very accessible tool to leverage the message and to go from very, very local, a very small or modest scale to an enormous potential of dissemination.
Raja, has that been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I can echo everything that's been said. I mean, for me, media and video is one tool. It's not necessarily the only tool we would use, and sometimes it's a very effective wrapper, to grab hold of and shape an issue and present the views of young people. You can, video, you can capture the moment and you can share that, but what we tend to do with video is it's only one aspect of one of our methodologies. So the video would be complemented by activities, by training, by some follow-up resources that complement the video. It's very much this education resources for the future. So video, it captures the moment. We have some complementary resources to go with it, and then that can be used in any environment, in any context that has access to a simple DVD player and maybe a teacher, a youth worker, a social worker. So that's how we tend to use video.
That's great. I'm going to ask you a very practical question, just a quick answer from each of you. Felicia Sena from Service Canada notes that all of these programs have shown to be very effective in engaging youth. She wonders whether the different levels of government in your respective areas have supported your work, and if so, in what ways? So we have two more interesting questions, so I'd just like a sort of a quick answer from you, Raja, and from you, Marion, on this one, please.
Straightforward, of course, government supports, but government tend to support once you can demonstrate the value. You know, the government does not necessarily support you all the time, and if you can demonstrate the value, there's a time and a place where they will support you, and there's a time and a place where they will ignore you. And that's the practicalities of living in, you know, and delivering interventions in the field we do.
Yeah. And actually, Helen, you may want to weigh in here too. With
we do get good support from all levels. So we get support at the federal level, both from the government in terms of the Department of Canadian Heritage, and then from the federal arts councils. And then we also get support from the provincial and the municipal arts councils. But for this program in particular, we get also support from the Toronto Community Foundation and the City of Toronto.
So multi-level support. How about you, Marion? Where would your...
Well, for the Belonging Project, we almost had no government funding apart from a little bit of funding from the Equality and Human Rights Commission in the UK. The funding for this project really came from foundations and other partners, including Portuguese television, but really no government money.
And we're coming now to the end of our talk, but there are two questions that have come in on the topic of helping to prevent violent extremism. One from Natalie Filion, who asks how you go about building resilience in young people in order to prevent violent extremism, something that Raja, you talked about. And then a second question noted again regarding getting young people to work on policy agendas. Jessica asks Raja how, and Marion, of course, and Florence, in your experience, how have young people responded to prevent these agendas about preventing violent extremism? Is this an issue that they feel is relevant to their own personal experience? That's an interesting question. Raja, would you like to comment there, please?
Do young people feel it's relevant, the Preventing Violent Extremism agenda? I think if you explain preventing violent extremism in language and through issues and challenges that young people face themselves, then yes, absolutely. But if you simply pick up the government test document, which we have in the UK, and try and present that, they'll look at you blankly and say, what has this got to do with us? I think the issue with preventing violent extremism is how you engage young people. Do you engage with young people because you want to build a resilience and empower young people so that they have the skills and understanding to protect themselves and better understand the agenda? If you do that, you have more of a chance of success. If you want to engage young people on the premise that if you don't support them, they are somehow vulnerable and they can become extremists, and I think it's a very naive way of doing this sort of work. I mean, very quickly, the history of our work in this agenda isn't with Muslim communities; it's with white working class communities, historically in the 80s and 90s, who were at risk of exploitation by far-right organisations. And what we very quickly learned is that if you go into a community or if you go into a group of young people and you say, we're here to stop you from becoming racist, you're going to get a very negative response. And what we're seeing today with Muslim communities is very much this notion of we're here to come to stop you from becoming an extremist. And for us it's no surprise that the response is more often than not a negative, because you've gone in with that perception. You've got to transform the language so it becomes empowering for these communities and these young people. And what you then see is some really innovative responses from young people and a desire to contribute.
Well, I want to thank you very much. That's actually a wonderful note, I think, to end this session on the notion that we have to think carefully about the messages that we that we use not just with young people but with the broader community, and the importance of remembering that two-way dynamic when we talk about integration, about how these ideas that we're trying to bring forward have to shape both new and older communities. So I want to thank you for your participation. Our time has run out. We're going to let you return to your busy days in London, Oldham, New York, and beyond. But on behalf of all our participants, I want to thank you, Raja, of Peacemaker in Oldham, Marian Vargavtig of Manifesta in London, Florence Laufer with the UNAOC in New York, and of course Helen Walsh, who's sitting beside me from Diaspora Dialogues here in Toronto.